I've scoured the internet and watched a host of videos trying to gather as many tips as I can. I've learned from a lot of really cool artists online. For today, we're going to be doing something a little different. Essentially, how to digitally paint with some dynamic lighting. Ilya Koshinov, Mark Burnett, Law, picking the brains of other artists that I like, adding my little sauce on top. But first, this video is brought to you by Alchemy Stars. Alchemy Stars is a thrilling and revolutionary new line strategy game, a mobile RPG. New adventure with that anime vibe, so you know, visually at least, got my attention. And for this video, as a model, we're actually going to be using a character hero from Alchemy Stars for the tutorial. There are a host of other characters and fractions, stellar artwork, so please go check out the game, and if you want to support the channel, use my link in the description. When you look at all the character design stuff for video games especially, it's usually detailed. It's very rare that it has a simple anime cell shading style, even though those can be really cool as well. I think they're cool. But most times you see a more dynamic, painterly, character design, detailed approach. So it's only fitting that we use that for this video. So having a little fun here, you guys can go look at the Alchemy Star characters, a wide variety of really cool character designs. You guys can draw them using the tips from this video and then share them with me on Twitter. Just make sure to use this hashtag and I'll be retweeting and quote retweeting my favorites. Let's get it! Initially I was thinking one where she's drawing out her sword, and then I thought, you know, we can just do something a little more standard, like a character design sheet, but have a little more fun with a really cool pose from a slightly dynamic angle. I actually then went on to create the line art in Clip Studio Paint and then saved as a PSD to open in Photoshop. But here was the line art. Turn off the sketch layer, and that's what we put together. The coat and the red cloth kind of flowing in the wind, making her look really cool. Seeing full body, but also from below to a degree. How you put together line art will be up to you, but here my lines are really visible. After that, I kind of fill in the silhouette of the character just in case it becomes handy on a separate layer, in case I want things clipped to that silhouette. That way, if I'm working on that clip layer, it will only stay within the confines of the character's silhouette. So here's what we got. The color doesn't matter. This is just to fill in the space. And then we create my flats layer, which as you can see is clipped to it, and we just turn that on and you can see what it looks like. This is basically what we're going to be working with. And the approach of coloring that we're going to be using here, sometimes, you know, even though she has like these really light white pants on, the type of white you pick should be a little darker. And what I have here is even maybe a little light, and you'll see the changes I made with an adjustment layer with the brightness that only affected her pants. As you can see everywhere is black except for the part where her pants are, because I wanted to increase the darkness just a little bit on just the pants and other things that are bright on the flats. I could have just changed the colors directly, but this is just, you know, show you guys what you can do with the adjustment layers as well. So overall, the flats are clear and nothing too bright, even if the original colors are traditionally bright colored. I darken things a little bit further again. As you can see, these are both brightness and contrast adjustment layers, but one only covers the pants, one covers the whole canvas, at least the whole character silhouette, because both are going to be clipped to that silhouette, even including the flats. So this one's darkening everything, while this one is darkening just the pants a little bit. To get these adjustment layers, you're going to come here to the adjustments window, and then you hit on brightness and contrast, and it will automatically create one. And now we want to shade. Almost all the layers we'll be working with now are all going to be clipped to that silhouette, and to clip is just to go in between the layers, hold Alt, and then click. It's the same if you want to unclip the layers as well. I recommend you guys play with it, and it will really help you understand what's going on. So for the shading layer, here I decided to go with a more painterly approach, taking some tips from a video I saw from Mark Burnett. We're essentially picking a color from here, or something here if I remember the video correctly, and then you want to change the blending mode of that layer to difference. Now while you have that, you then shade the character normally, as you would, and also feel free to then reduce the opacity appropriately, because sometimes it might feel a little too harsh if you just leave the opacity at 100. So here I have it at a 78%, but normally in my style, I generally reduce the opacity to, you know, somewhere around 30, but I use a completely different type of blending mode, linear burn, And then whatever colors I pick, I just make sure it's a little darker, kind of like center saturated, right? And the color you choose will be based on the environment and how you want to actually color the character. The linear burn at a 47%, for difference at a 78%. I'm more of a linear burn person, but just for the sake of this video and coming out of my comfort zone, I'm going to be trying out new stuff, and so we're going to stick with the difference for now. Then after that, we want to then work on the lights. Well, we're working on a video game. This character Hero is from the Alchemy Stars video game. He was a professional artist for video games, so we're just gonna play by those rules for a second. Lean on brand. But then adding the lights, again, I have my own approach for doing this, but here's another. We want to add a warm light. You pick the appropriate color, somewhere in this range, and then if you double click on the layer, it'll then give you a layer style option and give you more options in general. You want to make sure you tick on the inner glow, and then you pick an orange warm color and change the blend mode of just that to a hard light. And it gives a little nice sunlight-ish effect. Sometimes the overall warm layer is on an overlay blending mode, and sometimes it's on a hard light blending mode. And then again, you're taking your understanding of volume and the shape of your character, the pose and all of that, and understanding where your light source is coming from to then place the light on the character appropriately. You might also want to clip this layer to the rest of them. And then you can have two light sources, one that's more subtle, and you can even play around with different kinds of blending modes with this one. And I wanted a cool light coming from below. So again, we picked an appropriate color, did the same thing with the inner glow, picking a more purpley color instead. Double click, inner glow, hard light. You can increase or reduce the opacity. You can play around with all the settings to see what they do and have fun with that. I think it's a great way to learn. And it just makes the overall coloring feel much more dynamic. The overall lighting for the character feels a lot more dynamic. Again, you might want to clip this to everything so that nothing's coming out of the silhouette of the character. Some parts of the lighting you want to make sure feels more subtle than others, but it's up to you. As long as you kind of have a decent grasp on lighting, you should be good. I don't paint like this normally, but again, I'm trying out new things, and I think it's a great way for you guys to see it and also learn. But I'm going to add my little spices here and there just to deviate a little bit. But as is, I'm already liking what we're creating. Now, depending on you and your art style, you might want to have more subtle lines for the line art and reduce the opacity there. Maybe reinforce some parts like the eyebrows, but overall reduce the opacity. Again, completely up to you. I like it at 100. I don't really play with that too much. But there are things that you can do is where you have another layer clipped to just the line art. And that way, anything you draw will only appear on the spaces that the line arts occupy. And if I turn that on, you will notice subtle things where not every part of the line art is complete black like it was normally. So on this color layer, I could literally change the line arts of just certain parts that I want. As an example, looking at that nose, I want to change the color just to red, make it a little redder, whatever. You can see what it does. And it's only appearing on the parts that the line art occupies because the layer we're working on is clipped to the line art. So sometimes you can have this approach and change the line art colors for whatever you want. And so for skin, maybe you actually want something this, not necessarily red, but more of like a really dark orange. Or in the hair, want something pink, change that. But doing all this kind of stuff is up to you. I don't necessarily do it as much, and you do need some precision when putting it together. It can look cool if you know what you're doing. One of the last things you do is then an extra layer above everything. It doesn't necessarily have to be clipped. It's just having a little extra shine, adding it to certain parts of maybe the hair highlights if you want. But I definitely add those in the eyes just to give it that little extra life sometimes. Make some things pop. Any gold or metal parts of the character, you can do that as well. Keep track of trying to go in detail with all these little things, because the little things help sell. If you want to take a step back and look at how all these affect say that belt. This was kind of how the flats were looking. Obviously the pants are still darkened because I have that brightness layer on. Let's turn that off for a second. So we have the shading on. Let's turn on the flats. Turn on the warm light that we put on it. And then the cool. And it just gives the overall drawing that extra edge. One of the reasons I darken the pants is so that the warm lighting shows even better. Because if the flat colors are really bright, then it'll be more difficult to show. So once I turn on that brightness layer again, see what it does. Extra pop. Everything else on the character was darkened already. The pants were maybe a little lighter than I had hoped. And so now we have all of that on, and so this is where I start to add a little bit of my sauce to give it a little oomph. Added this gradient layer. It's essentially just this warm orange from the top doing the gradient, and then violet color doing the same but from below. Then change the blending mode to color dodge. You can see it kind of gives the overall drawing, again, some extra oomph. Emphasizing on the light sources that are hitting from above with the warmth and then coming from below with the cool. But this might be a little bit too overpowering. I also have it above the line art layer, but it's a little too overpowering, and so as a result, you can reduce the opacity. And I reduced the opacity to about maybe a 25. More sauce. We go selective color. We turn that on. If you notice, some of the line art, like the line art, is no longer a flat black color. And here with selective color, we have it on black, and that way we're affecting just the blacks on the overall illustration. It's an adjustment layer, so it's affecting everything underneath. It's not clipped to anything, so it's literally affecting the whole canvas. And then if you look at the settings, if I reduce the blacks more, you can see what's doing. And if I increase something else, it's just replacing that black with what it's got going on. And so now everything feels even blue. But for the settings I have, I like what I got. And I think this is a nice blend where it still looks black at first glance, but if you come close, it's kind of got a little hint of like a blue and a red. Basically a cyan and a magenta. And then the last thing I do is give it a little bit of curve. Now the curve just makes everything pop, because I'm playing around a little bit with some contrast. These are all adjustment layers that you can find here, right? So curves is what we got. Turn it on. See this extra pop. Again, it's an adjustment layer on its own. If you think it's popping too much, you can also reduce the opacity. But once you click on it, you get this box for its properties. I always like to give it a subtle S-curve starting from the top right. And sometimes the S-curve is a little more intense, but I like what we got. And again, if it's too intense, you can come adjust it here with this icon, or you can just reduce the opacity. One of my last sauces that I put is then to, basically I select all the layers, and then I duplicate, merge, and then select the whole canvas. Put a Gaussian blur at 30%, lighten blending mode, and this is all on the new merged layer, and then reduce the opacity to about a 30 or 40. And this kind of softens everything, softens the whole illustration, softens the maybe extra sharp lines for the line art, softens the colors a little bit, and even gives this nice glowy effect that works pretty well on a white background. There's so much more we could do, maybe taking all the layers again, duplicating, and then merging. And this time, we select the whole canvas, put a Gaussian blur, and then we create a mask right here to add a layer mask. And it almost starts to treat that layer as an adjustment layer that's affecting the whole canvas. But now, in black, find a soft brush. Remember, if it's in white, that means it's affecting the whole canvas. If I just tap somewhere you see black, you see it over there, that means this is not going to affect that place. Now we don't see it as much because the whole thing is white, so that part's not blurred. So if we just go over certain parts of the drawing, we're going over it, going over this drawing, and then reducing the opacity a little bit. That way, the further we look away from the character, it has blurred edges. The sharpest parts of the drawing are the parts we want the viewer to really focus on, and that's maybe in the face area and stuff. I don't think it's necessary. That's just showing you guys a little extra trick. You can actually apply it to maybe full illustrations and less so, character design kind of stuff. But aside from that, and also taking a couple of tips and tricks that I learned myself, that's a nice start. I'd love to see what you guys do with your own digital dynamic paintings. Again, use the hashtag and share them with me on Twitter, and I'll be sharing my favorites. I think the hero character here from Alchemy Stars came out pretty dope.
Okay, for the 2.5 people that made it to the end of this video, thank you. Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment if you have any questions. Holy go smash the subscribe button, then hit the bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. Turn on all notifications. Check out my videos, my comic Apple Black, my social media, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Links to everything you could possibly need will be in the description, including the link to Alchemy Stars. Please go check it out. You'll be supporting the channel. And that's all, folks. It's Whyt Manga, and I'm Audi 9000.